What if I told you that Congress can actually be your best friend when it comes to getting funding inside the Department of Defense? Well, it can be if you do all the stuff that I'm about to lay out for you. So first, let's understand, how does money show up in the Defense Department? There are two things that really matter when it comes to engaging with the Department of Defense and how Congress kind of influences that. First, you have the National Defense Authorization Act, or the NDAA. Now, this is an authorizing bill, and it authorizes the different things that the government is allowed to spend money on, or the military specifically is allowed to spend money on. Inside the NDAA, you'll find a whole bunch of rules and regulations, and it's a very effective tool for controlling internal government decision-making, internal government policies, procedures, processes. It's not an effective tool for getting your project funded. It's actually a very ineffective tool for that in most cases. On the flip side, you have the Appropriations bill. This is done by the Appropriations Committee, and they effectively have what's called the power of the purse. They control the funding that goes to the military, and they'll look at what comes in from the POM and what the president's budget is, and they'll look through that and they'll say, here I think you should plus up some money, here I think you should subtract some money, and then they actually make the money become available from the Treasury. Now, conceptually, the two groups would talk to each other. That doesn't happen as much as you would like to believe they do. But both groups are critical. Now, in the traditional world, the world that we lived in, prior to Trump, the Trump administration, I would say that the authorizers, the NDAA committee, they had the least amount of power in Congress when it came to doing business with the Department of Defense. And if you were to get a lobbyist, and a lot of these lobbyists are charging $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 a month retainer fees, they would tell you, I can get you in the NDAA. We're going to cause the government to do a study with you, and we'll put some NDAA language in that makes them study whatever product or service that you're interested in selling. And companies that didn't know any better would be really excited about this. And they're like, oh yeah, okay, I'm in the NDAA. This means we're going to study my area of expertise, and I have a really high chance of getting a contract because of that. But the reality is, on the government side, if the appropriators do not work with the authorizers and actually fund those studies, they won't ever happen. And the government gets so many of those requests that they're like, hey, where's the money? I can't do it without the funding. So they've kind of fell on deaf ears inside the government, and it turns out to be a giant waste of money for the companies that are paying for these lobbyists. So on the appropriator side, you can go direct to the appropriators and say, hey, here's a white paper I have for a project. It's a really good project. It's going to tie to national defense. I have it in user inside the government that would be very interested in this. Here's that program manager's name or that champion's name inside the government. But they don't have the funding right now to pull this off because, hey, there's a 5-year planning cycle. The POM cycle is really long. This is emerging tech. It's really important. Those appropriators have the ability to insert things in the bill. Really, any congressional member can work with the Appropriations Committee to get things inserted in the bill that have funding tied to it. Now, in some appropriations that aren't the DoD, you can actually do earmarks and name the company. You cannot do that in the DoD appropriations bill. What you can do is specifically name a technology. So what I see in these bills are a white paper with a title. That title could be something specific or generic. I'd say something in between. You don't want to call out your company, but you want to call out something that's unique enough where if it does show up in the bill, you can flag it for the government office like, hey, that money is for this project. They put the money into the bill shows up, and it's normally assigned to a specific program element or a PE. That PE is tied to a PIM or a program element manager, and that PIM has a program officer they support. So when the money shows up, they will actually ask the program office, hey, do you know what this money's for? Do you know what the congressional intent is? I need you to write what's called a spend plan to identify what the congressional intent for this money is and what your plan for spending the funding is. So the program manager would be responsible for writing a spend plan. That spend plan then goes up through the PIM to OMB, and OMB guys are actually going to ask the staffers on the Appropriations Committee, hey, what does this spend plan align with what your congressional intent was for this funding. And most of the time they're going to say yes, or they'll say yes or no if it does or it doesn't. But once they say that, then the financial managers are able to put the money onto the program element and allow it to flow all the way down so that a purchase request can be made, and then the project can go through the RFP process and go on contract. Okay, that's the traditional world. In the new world, post-Trump, post the FY25 full year CR, or continuing resolution, the game's kind of changed a little bit. The way they did the full year CR for FY25 was they appropriated all the funding top line, which means they gave each department so much money to spend. They might have broken into a handful of funding categories like research and development versus O&M funding, but by and large, they just gave big buckets of funding to the department and said, you have discretion to figure out how to spend this money. When Congress did that, they advocated a whole bunch of control and power into the services. So I was shocked they did it, and I think the government was shocked, like the broader DoD was shocked on how it's playing out. And I'm not fully sure Congress understood what they did when they actually did this, but it allows the DoD to easily move money around inside the department to go fund projects. Well, if the appropriators aren't putting money onto program elements and controlling how that money's spent through the appropriations process, that leaves the next most powerful group to be the authorizers, the NDAA folks, because the NDAA community can actually write rules in the NDAA for how the government must function, how the Department of Defense must function for buying different things. So you can actually write in rules into the NDAA that says, hey, for this kind of project, the government needs to do X, Y, and Z. Both the NDAA, or the Authorization Act, and the Appropriations Bill are law once they get signed. Okay, so they both carry the same weight, but the appropriators are where make the money show up. And if they make the money show up on specific program elements in a very specific way, it makes it a lot harder to change. But if they appropriate all the money top line to a service, there's a lot more flexibility there. Now, from the authorizer's perspective, they normally authorize a whole bunch of stuff that never gets funded. But if something is authorized and there's a top line budget from the appropriators, you can spend the money on anything that's authorized. The authorizers also have the ability to make those rules that I was talking about. So somewhere in between is the Department of Defense, and they're sitting there trying to adjudicate, how do I spend this money? They don't know how to spend it. In many cases, they still don't know to this day, as of filming, how they're going to spend some of the funding that was put out there. But there could be rules that are put into the authorization side that actually dictate how they need to spend this money. So that has shifted a lot of the balance of power back over to the authorizers from the appropriators. That's what happened in FY25 for the full year CR. Now for FY26, it's anyone's guess. Did the appropriators reclaim their throne as one of the most powerful committees in Congress? I think they are going to try. Or do we see another top line budget where the money is just pushed out at the top line with the discretion for the services to spend where they believe the money should be spent? In that case, anything that goes in the NDAA could have a lot more power if you are working your lobbyists to submit things into the NDAA that have instructive rules for how they need to buy certain technologies. You see, anything that goes in the NDAA that isn't tied to funding still carries the weight of law, and the government has to follow it. If not, they're breaking the law, literally. So I would leverage that once we know, hey, are the authorizers going to appropriate top line or not? There's a different power dynamic in play. So we saw this play out, and it is playing out in real time with the reconciliation bill, what was called the One Big Beautiful Bill out of the Trump administration. This bill put together $150 billion in defense spending that was from other priorities from past administration. They carved it out and they said, look, this money's already appropriated. We're just going to change or reauthorize what it can be used for. So it's uses. So they kind of outlined over 200 different categories of uses, but they didn't put the money onto program elements. So inside the government, they're scratching their head like, how do I spend this money? I don't know where it should go. Normally, if there's funding that's added to a funding line, at a minimum, it gives the financial managers a breadcrumb to go and ask the program office, hey, do you know what this money's for? Do you know how we should spend this money? When they don't put the money onto a program element, it's up for grabs effectively. So the government's trying to determine what process they're going to use to spend the reconciliation dollars. But I believe this could be the perfect prototype for what a world looks like without a traditional budget, without the POM process, without all these program elements that are dictating where the money goes. You see, for the entirety of government's history since like the McNamara times, back when we switched this 5-year planning cycle, the government was fed. They were told, here's the money on your plate. You will eat all your money. And if you don't eat all your money, you're not going to get as much money or maybe any money next time. Sit down, eat your food. In this new world, this new paradigm, they're saying, here's a buffet. Here's all the different opportunities that are available for things that we would love for you to work on, priorities of the administration. But you have to come feed yourself. You have to walk up to the table and explain how you're going to spend that money. And the process to do that right now is a spend plan. Now, no one has come out with the rules on how they're going to spend the money or what the process is going to be. But I can tell you, if there's someone savvy out there that's mingling inside the NDAA and they're tweaking things, they could actually insert language in the NDAA to help influence the process for how that funding gets spent. Now, in an ideal world, we do have a scenario where all the units of government have access to all the dollars. What I mean by that is, if one of the buckets of funding is for innovation activities, and you have a unit that wants to do an innovation activity, they can submit a spend plan up through their chain that goes and requests money out of the innovation bucket. Okay, you see there's a project, it's innovative, it's got an acquisition strategy, it's got a pathway. The person that is the arbiter of that funding can say, yep, it checks off all the boxes I care about, acquisition pathway, it fits the intent of the funding, which is to do an innovation activity, whatever. They would approve that project, then it goes on to the PE. It goes on the program element, and it can be spent like a traditional acquisition where you have an RFP that comes out and the money's loaded onto a purchase request. If that's the case, it will effectively open up in the entire $1 trillion budget is what they're saying in the FY26 budget it's going to be for all units. And it's going to allow the units that have, we'll say, creative or ambitious program managers or members in the unit that know they have projects and need to fund it and are willing to hustle to do the extra work. It's going to give them an asymmetric advantage to get things done. Now, I've given the current administration a ton of credit for all sorts of stuff, from DRP to this project, and how this could be a benefit strategically. I don't actually know if they've thought through all these things, but the strategic plus side to this is it could really force the government to start thinking critically on how they're going to spend money and spend activity on the things that are the administration's priorities. What those projects are, that's details to the administration conceptually. It should be left to the units to decide what the right projects are. But if they're in alignment with the administration's priorities, the administration wins, the units win, and the companies win because they've now shifted their products and services to go fit what the country needs. And those needs were determined by elections. So ultimately, I am very optimistic about what the process could be. What I'm pessimistic about is we're leveraging a government workforce that has been beaten down, told they're not good enough, told they're lazy, they've lost half their staff. They're in a tough spot, both psychologically and in actuality. They have less people to do the same, if not more work than they had before. So we're now asking that workforce to go do more work and go feed themselves when their entire history, they were fed. Their money was put into their program element and they were told, eat all your money, and they did. Now they have to go and make themselves useful. So with that, I think it's a grand experiment. We'll see what happens, but Congress can be your best friend. If you're actively engaging with Congress as a small business, I would encourage you to first start locally. Look for your congressional rep, look for who supports you in the House, and then look to your senators. You should be talking to them. Now, are there donations and things that will help you get in the room with these people? Absolutely. I can maybe talk about that in another video, but you should be engaging with these folks and these members. Now, you should also have a strategic plan to align with members that can make the biggest impact for where you're at. So if you're trying to do work with the Department of Defense, you can go and look up who the appropriators are for the Defense Department, and you can look up who's on the NDAA committee. So if you go and look up those two groups, maybe those are some senators and some congressional members that you should be talking to and finding ways you can be useful to them. Now, each one of these members of Congress, they put out on their websites what their priorities are. And then obviously there's their party affiliation. So if they're Republicans, they're going to line up under the president by and large. If they're Democrats, they're likely just going to oppose everything the president has to say. But somewhere in between, there's actual priorities that they've identified on their websites that are going to help their communities. I can tell you, the single largest driver of congressional support is your ability to create jobs in their districts. Jobs mean dollars to them, and they have funny math for how they calculate the jobs. So if you're going to create, let's say, a $200,000 job in someone's district, they might count that as like 5 jobs, because that $200,000 job is then going to employ a barista, it's going to employ an auto mechanic, it's going to employ a waiter or waitress at a restaurant. It's got a trickle-down effect. So job creation is a big deal for them, and that's what gets them reelected in many cases. So when you come to them with a plan or a project, also come to them with a strategy how it's going to benefit them in their district or in their area. If you can do that, you'll have greater success. The next thing to do is to understand what other companies are they supporting actively in their area. And you can do this by looking at which companies are supporting their campaigns, which companies are supporting their PACs, where are the donations flowing, and then how can you partner with those companies? Those companies are already have the ear of the congressional members. So if you can make those companies better, you can make those companies' products or services better, you can support them in some way, you'll be able to get access to that same type of deal flow. And they will introduce you to who some of the kingmakers are in these organizations. In many cases, it's going to be an ex-staffer of the congressional member that has retired from that job after 20 plus years, started a consulting firm or a lobbyist firm, and they have the ear of their member. You got to play the game. I would hire those firms if you can. A lot of times they're in high demand, but that is how you get access to Congress, and you can make very specific requests. When I was in the government, we did over $150 million a year in congressional ads. Those were all going to small businesses. Those were all being tied back to funding that or projects that were in those members' districts, but all things that we knew the government needed. So I viewed it as my job to make sure that, hey, Congress wants money to go to a certain place. They want it to go back to their district. They can't say that in the bill, but I can read between the lines. How do I make sure the government still gets something valuable for those dollars that's going to impact the warfighter that I'm serving, and we take care of Congress's intent too? So it's always trying to find that win-win on both sides if you're the government person that's dealing with one of these congressional ads. But if you're a company that's seeking one, know that they are available. People get them all the time. But just because money gets put into a bill does not mean that it's necessarily going to go towards you. You might have been the one that did all the work to get the money there. You did the lobbying. You had it all lined out. But then the money hits PEOs, program element, and for whatever reason, a new priority emerges. This is where it really matters, that relationship side. If you have a good relationship with your government counterpart, company to government counterpart, they can be tracking this funding, and they can make sure that there's a legal acquisition pathway to go to you. That's what some of these direct acquisition pathways that I teach are. But if that doesn't exist, or if the PEO has their own ideas about what should happen with the money, the PEO has what's called below the threshold reprogramming authority. That means they can move money that Congress said should be for A and use it for B. And they can do that. I think it's $20 million is the reprogramming authority they have. So that's a way people lose their ads sometimes. But if you have a good relationship with the government program office, you've been able to articulate a need, and you've gotten Congress on your side, the money will show up. It will eventually make its way to you, and you'll be able to do great work for the Department of Defense. So if you liked anything I had to say today, please subscribe. Please support the channel. And if you are interested in getting access to my direct acquisition playbook, please send me a message on Instagram at Vince_Pecararo, and I'll shoot it right over to you. Thanks. Have a great day.